Hey, good people. Welcome to the Mr. Teacher, Mr. Preacher podcast and YouTube channel. I am Kevin. That is Jake. He is the preacher. I am the teacher. And today we are going to talk about our second installment in John Wooden's Pyramid of Success on self-control. Self-control being practicing self-discipline and keeping your emotions under control. Good judgment and common sense are essential. Our job is to take lessons and tools and ideas from books and share them with you to make you a better coach. And if you are listening and you are an athlete or parent, you as well. We've already covered our first installment, Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday. And now we are going to move to Mark Manson's Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, a counterintuitive approach to living a good life. To refrain and keep ourselves under self-control, we will be alluding to all F-bombs as F or some version thereof within. Jake, good to see you. I'm ready to go. This is going to be a fun one. This is probably one of the books that I have read now. This is the third time of the last 10 years. It has been one of the ones that's just hilarious and challenges you. So I'm excited to talk about it with you, especially under the guise of self-control. So would you bless the episode, kick us off, and then I will get us a good grounding on what is this book about and where we're going.
Certainly. So you've read this 3 times already? This is your third time reading it?
I read it once from the library, and I regretted not being able to mark it up. That's why I don't get books from the library anymore. Then I got the digital version because they had like that Kindle deal for like $1.99. And then now I have it again, but this is my own copy. So what's up?
Very nice. Very nice. I went to a Barnes & Noble not that long ago, and it was the first time I had seen it and had a good chuckle for a while.
It's so funny.
When I came across it, I'm finding a new hobby and just walking around Barnes & Noble and looking at all of the things that people write about. It is slightly overwhelming and slightly amazing at the same time. Okay, sounds good. We'll let's get her going here. Father, thank you so much for this opportunity to meet with Kevin and our audience and discuss things that are important, that matter, that last, things to dwell on, things to seek out. And we pray that our conversation would be edifying to those listening, that'd be edifying to both Kevin and I, and that we would share our hearts inhibited, and that it would be a blessing to those that hear. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Feels a little bit heresy to pray and then to talk about a book with just amount of slander and profanity, but I digress. So what is it? The Lord works in mysterious ways. All right. So let's start at the beginning with too many F's. So this book is oriented around one of the general ideas that we care too much about too many stupid things, or just too many things in general. Right? We give our F's away. You only got so many F's, so you got to be picky and choosy. So I want to take us back and say, and we talked about this a little bit, like we scored ourselves in Discipline is Destiny about, the external, the internal, and the magisterial. So those 3 areas and where we were good and where we weren't. But let's get really this down to it. This is very much the inner domain and the emotions. As an athlete, go back, and as a coach, maybe as a young coach, what did you give too many F's about that really don't matter now looking back?
Ooh. Too many F's about other players just in general. Viewing them, comparing myself to them, wondering where I stood in the pecking order, et cetera, et cetera. And here's my controversial one. I gave too many F's about what coaches thought. And not enough about what I thought or wanted. Those are 2 that jump straight off. What about yourself?
As an athlete, having gone through such a physical change, I was very self-conscious of the way I looked, right? Because it had changed so dramatically in such a short amount of time. I'm thinking like straight from like 7th, 8th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade to maybe probably my junior year when I realized that muscles were cool and having muscles was cool. And even my senior year. So I hyper focused on the almost to a detriment, putting too much time or probably too much energy into that. And it did give an edge. It was just a double-edged sword. And so, yeah, I got the benefits of being stronger and faster and better than I was had I not done that. But I also got the constantly worrying, even to an overextent of, your jersey and like, you know, whatever. It depends on the sport, right? And that was the thing as you play video games, like you like to create your character and like, you know, you had to give off the signal of like, I got the armband or this or that. And then also just to make you laugh, because you can you remember I hated, and maybe this is a thing for anybody else out there. I have to this day, I refuse to wear gray. All gray shirts. Okay, now everybody, now Jake's in Arizona, so he knows people are probably culturally okay with this. As a heavy sweater, I detest it. We had a jersey, I'm just thinking of basketball, that was red, and it was like this material that was not sweater friendly. But like your butt would just have this shape of sweat, of swass, like midway through that first half. And you just couldn't, like, there's a crowd and like everybody knows. And like I was, you know, I had the cool cutoff thing, and but no matter how good a shape I was in. So I to this day, I hated the amount of sweat. Like, dude, you're sweating. Yeah, no crap. Like, what do you want me to do about it? So, I'll give you in a second in a moment. But as a coach, I guess I was trying so hard to figure out what I was doing that I was constantly looking at what other coaches were doing and pinning myself against them in comparison. It wasn't really a fair comparison to be like a first, second, third year coach and then be able to look at somebody who's been doing it a long time. Or even having some sort of like, you know, a lot of us as we're trying to learn who we are and get our own voice in our coaching, you know, you kind of take on these stereotypes, like you need to be tough, like especially when you handle certain situations, like, okay, I have a kid acting out, you know, I'm going to punish the whole team. I just saw that the other day with a youth wrestling practice, for instance. Like 3 kids aren't listening. Okay, the whole team is going to do the role. I mean, you know, back then I probably would have done the exact same thing because that's what you do, right? Now I look at that a little bit differently. Like, you 3, go sit up for a second. Yeah, I asked nicely once. Don't mistake kindness for weakness. So yeah, those are kind of my fun ones that I gave too many F's about. And today I don't blame myself. I think that's exactly what I would have done. But I admire kids who didn't have that self-consciousness that I had at that time.
No, I appreciate that. You're right to the Arizona point. It's much more culturally acceptable to just sweat it out, man. Like it's 1:15 out here. Everyone knows we're in an oven. Just do what you got to do. But also, you know, gray, we try to keep out of the wardrobe for sure. On my end, I'm a heavy sweater too. I just never ran into that while playing sports. Like I thought that was my excuse to sweat a whole lot. So don't ask me questions about it, kind of a deal.
Yeah, but there's like regular person level of sweat, and then there was my tier level of sweat. It's like, dude, we just did warm-ups. Are you okay? Yes, I'm fine.
It reminds me of Along Came Polly. I don't know if you know that movie or not, but Ben Stiller's in it. And he goes and plays basketball, pick a basketball in New York, and he's got a guy he doesn't have a shirt on, who's hairy and just sweating profusely. It's a great scene.
So one thing we cannot control is our ability, or maybe you can, I don't know. Somebody tell me if you can control how much you sweat or not over time. It hasn't mattered no matter how good of shape I've been in. So this episode, as we go forward, I'm going to give just a basic grounding. If you have not read, this is great. I say every book is great, so you can take that with a grain of salt. But this one is very popular in the mainstream. It seems to be a very big seller, along with James Clear's Atomic Habits and a few others. This one really resonated because it's very raw. I mean, he's very, very, Mark Manson is very vulnerable. He's crass. I think he speaks like most of the population more or less speaks. But it's interesting. So I want to cover just some base things about the book, how it's structured, some just general overarching themes. And then we're going to switch it up from our previous episodes. So if you've watched before, we followed a very, very similar structure. I'm going to turn that over to Jake. And Jake's going to pick some topics that have stood out to him that we've written up. And we'll just kind of take the conversation where it is. Because when you cover a book in an episode like this and you're not interviewing the author, you could go anywhere and you could go a long time. So we're just going to do less is more, see kind of where the conversation goes, and we'll save the rest of it for social media. So that's why you should follow along there. All right. To start off is in the beginning, Mark makes his case for the subtle art of not giving enough. And he says some things. So here's some key highlights. In the beginning, he did like we did. In my life, I've given a F about many things. I've also not given an F about many things. And like the road not taken, it was the F's not given that made all the difference. I like that punny Robert Frost switch. He does that quite a bit, which is funny. But moving on, it's to not give an F is to stare down life's most terrifying, difficult challenges and still take action. Most of us struggle throughout our lives by giving too many F's in situations where F's do not deserve to be given. Guilty. And I think we are. Absolutely. I think that's why this book is going there. So he moves forward and says very simply, he says, you know, you're going to die one day. And in the short amount of time between here and there, you have a limited amount of F's to give. Very few, in fact. And if you go around giving an F about everything and everyone without conscious thought or choice, well, then you're going to get F'd. I'm like, preach, brother. So this book is how to pick and choose what matters to you and what does not matter to you based on finely honed personal values. This is something I wanted to highlight too. This is incredibly difficult. It's not just like, oh yeah, make your choices, because choices have consequences and whatnot, even good ones, as we will learn later. It takes a lifetime of practice and discipline to achieve, and you will regularly fail. So why did we pick this book for this topic? Because that takes a lot of control, not only to choose, but to keep your choices and to not waste energy. And Wooden would probably not like this book, for the record. I am aware of that. He would say that the language is too much for him. Conceptually, though, it's spot on. And this is where we need to live, is within that realm of control. So continuing on, page 20. Is this book? He says it right. So Mark, what the F is the point of this book anyway? This book will help you, he says. You think a little bit more clearly about what you're choosing to find important in life and what you're choosing to find unimportant. Okay? People no longer realize it's okay for things to suck sometimes. I like that. So he calls it as practical enlightenment. It's to turn your pain into a tool, trauma into power, your problem into slightly better problems. Think of it as a guide to suffering and how to do it better, more meaningfully, and with more compassion and more humility. This book will not teach you how to gain or achieve, but rather how to lose and let go. Something I struggle with, letting go, the letting go portion. It's easy to get entangled in the mess or knots of gunk of life, or whatever the F it is, especially if you have a lot of time and emotion into it. All right. So the first part of the book is kind of his initial treatise on the subtle art. And then there's a second half of the book where he talks about the backwards laws. And that comes from Alan Watts in page 9. And it's very similar. It's just it's back, things are backwards. The idea that the more you pursue feeling better all the time, the less satisfied you become, as pursuing something only reinforces the fact that you lack it in the first place. So that these counterintuitive. So he's purposely, what in the Greg McEwen sense, inverting everything to help us think it through again. So he has 5 other chapters in the second half of the book that all follow that backwards law, about in that they're negative. But when we confront the negative, we can be more positive. So he has responsibility, uncertainty, failure, rejection, and mortality are kind of the big themes there. And he's just really good at naming his chapters and his subtopics. But to finish this off, he said self-improvement really is just about prioritizing better values, choosing better things to give an F about. Because when you give better Fs, you get better problems. And when you get better problems, you get a better life. So that's the general premise of the book. It's awfully interesting just to read, just from an entertainment value, because he weaves back and forth. He did a great job. There's no secret why this book did so well. He does have a second book about everything is effed, a book about hope. So he does the same kind of continuation, and I don't think that one's done as well because it didn't have the shock value of the first.
Sure.
So Jake, I'm gonna pass it to you. He's gonna pick our topics, lead our discussion. I'll give a little bit of background on said topic, and we'll just see where it goes. Jake, where would you like to start?
Dive into it. I mean, man, I feel like there's already so many things in there that we could start unpacking, like bigger just life stuff, that go against some things that we have maybe mentioned or talked about in the past. So let's. we'll drive here. We'll see what we find, and I think some of those things will come out. How about the first 3 subtleties of not giving an F?
That's a good start. So Mark tells us very explicitly what he means, and I'll just read them and we can talk about them for a second. When most people envision giving no Fs whatsoever, they imagine a kind of sense of indifference to everything. That is not what we're talking about. He said an indifference to everything means you're a psychopath, which I died laughing. So what does giving an F mean? He said there's 3 subtleties. Number 1, not getting an F does not mean being indifferent. It means being comfortable with being different. And I think what he's getting at is like when you, he says it later in the book, because this appears in the beginning. When you choose a value, you are discarding other options, and it sets you apart. So when you're an athlete or a coach and you say, we value this as a program or as a person, that means, similar to what Saban said lately, and kudos to him on his great career. He said, when you're an athlete at this level, you really don't have that many choices. Your choices are made for you. Like you are going to be sitting here and saying, I'm going to be different, and this is what it takes. So it removes a lot of the questioning. It's like, well, in order to do this, this is the toll. Number 2, subtlety. To not give an F about adversity, you must first give an F about something more important than adversity. So having something beyond, meaning beyond the pain or the struggle, or anything like that. So that is something that comes up as well. And he illuminates on that later. But the third one, oh crud, I passed it, is whether you realize it or not, you are always choosing what to give an F about. You're not just, he says, when we're young, everything is new and exciting and everything seems to matter so much. Therefore, we give tons of Fs. We give an F about everything and everyone. But as we get older, we begin to notice that most of the sorts of things have little lasting impact on our lives. Immaturity is that selection. So there's a lot of immaturity. So you're going to give an F about something. It's just, what are you going to give an F about? So those are the 3 subtleties.
Yeah, so it really comes down to awareness. It's awareness of the situation that you're in. To the Nick Saban point, right? A lot of choices are made for you, sure, but you also have a lot of choices within that. But do you have the awareness of such? Do you have the awareness of what you truly don't have a decision for or on? And what do you have the ability to make decisions on? Would seem to be what he's getting at. Just an overall level of awareness of what you can even choose from. I think there seems to be in society, there's these people who do, is a good way to put it, try to give an F about everything. Everything that comes up is a big deal. Everything that comes up has to be run across this circuit board and analyzed and have a reaction to and have an opinion on. And I think it's kind of a sign of our times too, in the sense that we are so inundated with news, with stories, that you're expected to have almost an instant opinion on it and an instant stance on it. And if you don't, well, then you're weak. You're not well educated, you're whatever negative word you want to throw on it, when that's just not it's just not fair to anyone.
No,
at all.
And I laughed about that. It's like almost like an athletic immaturity, right? I mean, so it's like when one learns to only give an F about what's only truly F worthy. And so I wrote down the phrase like, oh, that's cute, that's all you have to play for. I mean, like, it really, like, when you think about it, and you said the self-awareness of most people are on autopilot, and very few actually have their hands on the controls, and then very few actually know where they're going after that. And excuse the analogy, flying analogy, but it's true. And so then you're, what I would say is emotionally reactive, which is, according to Wooden, at least in this definition, a very dangerous place to live. So I mean, if you've already made the decision as a coach, and we're going to get to it in the next book about the complaint-free world by Will Bone, you just don't complain to the refs. Like, it's a non-starter. So now you've offloaded that and say, well, no, like, you're going to focus on this. We don't do that. It's not even a discussion, but that had to, like you said, the awareness, then we're going to drive that, and then you reinforce it, right? Like, we don't do that here. So
Yeah. The awareness and then the development of value, right, also seems to be kind of what he's painting the picture of as the fence line of where your F start and stop. It's really around your values that you develop. And you can't have, to what you mentioned, you can't have every good thing be a value of yours, right? You're going to pick and choose things as someone. Just, I mean, as a coach, right, you're looking for specific things. You're not trying to be the perfect team necessarily. You're trying to create the biggest positive within a certain set of values, because I can't just lay out, here are 105 things that we're going to be this season, right? You're never going to do that.
No.
You're going to say, hey, here's 3 things that I want us to focus on, that we're going to be about, our program's going to be about, right? Or as a player, these are the 3 things that I want to be known for. You can't be known for 105 things. These are the 3 values I want to be known for that I'm going to focus on. But there's self-awareness in that. There's understanding that's what drives us. I like that he's kind of undertoned that as the fence line, if you will, the border, where does it fall into me giving an F or does it not? Well, what are my values?
And he gives some examples later of like what are crappy values versus good values. And, you know, obviously we've talked about a lot of these, and, you know, being virtuous and, you know, discarding pleasure and being positive all the time and whatnot. He doesn't coach as much of like how many. You know, I mean, it's not as I mean, this is more overarching, and then it's up to you to do kind of the work underneath. You know, there appears to be a sweet spot in that 3 to 5 range, that paradox of choice, kind of that Warren Buffett idea of, you know, list your 25 things, get down to your 5. Okay, discard everything else. And that's hard, right? I mean, because you're choosing between good and good, or better and best kind of thing. I also resonate with the Chris Gillaboo. He was the $100 startup guy. He's also got his own website, really great author in that kind of startup side hustle world. And he, in his initial manifesto that made him very popular and kind of catapulted him quite a bit as he traveled around the world, he said, you just don't have to live your life the way others expect you to. And that was interesting, you know. So as Mark talks about that, you know, we give away our F's very easily. I'm aware of that. And I remember seeing something similar to that in a post. It's like, somebody's like, where do you got the evidence for that? And it's like, dude, I just met you 10 seconds ago on the internet. Don't give me homework assignments, you know?
Oh, I love it. Not living the way people expect you to.
Correct.
I mean, that goes to what I said when I said, what was the thing they gave too much F's about as a player? It was that I gave too many F's about what coaches expected me to be and do, that it didn't allow me to really flesh out what I expected of myself, in a lot of ways. So great, love it. Okay, let's keep moving. He mentions an animal, a panda.
I was hoping you big.
Who doesn't love a panda?
Oh,
take us through the disappointment panda.
Okay, so I gotta honor the fact that I'm a dad at a certain age. I immediately, as I was reading this, was going Kevin Hart, like at the end of Secret Life of Pets. It's like panda, 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 panda. All right, remember the end, like the little sequence? You've seen it, haven't you? Okay,
I have. Yep.
All right, so what is disappointment panda, aka the mascot every team should have? Like, there should be a big squishmallow giant size panda at every practice and team. Like, you should just carry it on the bus with you. This is how gung-ho I am about disappointment panda. So Mark says, God, I can't wait to get your thoughts on this. If I could invent a superhero, he said, I would invent one called Disappointment Panda. His superpower would be to tell people harsh truths about themselves that they needed to hear, but didn't want to expect or accept. So here's some of the ones. ABC. He says he would go door to door like a Bible salesman and ring doorbells and say things like, sure, making a lot of money makes you feel good, but it won't make your kids love you. Knock, knock, knock. If you have to ask yourself if you trust your wife, then you probably don't. Knock, knock, knock. What you consider friendship is really just your constant attempts to impress people. The greatest truths, he said, in life are usually the most unpleasant to hear. And Disappointment Panda will be the hero that none of us would want, but all of us would need. He'd make our lives better despite making us feel worse. So I did write down the note of like speaking the truth with love. So there is that. But I'm going to continue with the crassness. He says, we suffer for the simple reason that suffering is biologically useful and it is nature's preferred agent for inspiring change. Pain in all its forms is our body's most effective means of spurring action. And so we have type 1 pain, which is physical pain, like, ooh, this hurts, like it doesn't feel good. But that's how muscles are grown. That's how speed is developed. That's how explosion happens. You have to take on stress. Psychological is type 2. We don't register much difference between physical and psychological pain. So just like stubbing our toe teaches us to walk into fewer tables, emotional pain of rejection or failure teaches us how to avoid making the same mistakes in the future. So we lose the benefits of experiencing healthy doses of pain, a loss that disconnects us from the reality world around us. So I think Disappointment Panda is interesting. So tell me what you think of having the mascot of Disappointment Panda on your team.
I love it. I think it would be a great way to for teammates, for coaches to be honest and create almost that safe avenue in the relationship to allow that to happen, kind of a deal. Like, I'm a big believer in the 1 degree rule. Was as soon as we depart 1 degree from each other, if we let that marinate, man, that 1 degree turns into miles and miles and miles, and we're super far apart, right? So having this panda there, it's like, okay, we're 1 degree apart, and you can say, hey, panda says da 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 da, right? Here's the honest truth. Here's what I'm thinking. I think it's such a great playful way to soften those interactions that we have until they just become part of our culture. It's like it's just a way to make it more palatable amongst teammates, amongst a coach to a player, whatever. Now, I think this is more player to player, peer to peer kind of deal than more coach to player. I think for a coach, this would be a great tool to instill that culture amongst players to converse, have those hard conversations, perhaps. Making it more specific in terms of, hey, if someone doesn't meet your expectation because the pass wasn't right or whatever, well, here's this avenue that you can engage your teammate in that conversation instead of just showing them up in front of a gym, in front of a field, whatever that may be. I'm a soccer guy. This may be the biggest thing in soccer that I just can't stand, right? It's just like part of the culture for people to get up and blame another person for something.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're wrong, like that was a bad decision or a bad pass, but there's an avenue to do it. Like that. Hey, Disappointment Panda says, you need to get your head up and find me there, pal. Like this is getting kind of absurd. All right, we can be better than this. I love the concept.
I don't know how to necessarily do this. I guess I'm less concerned about how to do it versus actually it happening. Like I would almost rather the truth come out, like almost bluntly. He and Mark talks later in the book about going to Russia and how blunt that culture is and how soft we are in America. And they talked about communism and the difference between Russia and the United States and whatever. Just speaking from his, I don't care what's going on culturally or societally right now. Just talking about the differences.
Yep.
The idea that because we care, I mean, I don't want to discard that. We care about athletes. We care about the program. We care about people's futures. So much it's at the expense of the truth. Right? And so you hear a lot of stories. Their arcs are, I hear this in fiction, nonfiction, everywhere in between. People withholding truth so they don't hurt somebody.
Yep.
It takes 5 books for Dumbledore to tell Harry he's going to die or he's going to kill him. It takes him. Why? Because I cared about you too much. All right. So I love the idea of this place. And I don't know why the panda is just a great animal of choice for this, but some way to, where even if you're reflecting on a game and it becomes this kind of like metaphorical concept or personification, it's like, okay, hey, well today, but hey guys, what's the truth? What's Disappointment Panda telling us right now?
Yep.
And I think people are very good. And I do think it should be controlled because it's very easy with our negative bias to put too much panda. All right. We don't need too much panda. We need a little bit of panda, but we don't need it to douse everything. So I think every team should have some version of this, where it becomes just fair because we can become mirrors for each other and it makes us better. And Mark makes that case throughout the whole book that if you are avoiding failure and rejection and these negative emotions, that is going to be suppressed, and then it's going to come out in all sorts of insecure ways. And that's why I think we don't have as confident of athletes, is because we're removing all negativity, sadness, anger, fear, and then they get all the anxiety because they haven't confronted the truth throughout. Right now, I'm playing a big game, and I don't think I can make that shot because nobody's told me the truth. My form sucks, and I can't get the shot off in a second and a half. Right. So, it's going to build eventually. And so I think that the truth or a disappointment panda to run with this might be useful. So having the control and the discipline to tell the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love it. And I think that leads into the next one that I want to ask you about, which is emotions are overrated. So I'll let you kind of start teeing that one up. But I think you made the point initially of, the role that pain and suffering has in a person growing, and how necessary it is, or how great of a motivator that is. And so, you receive those honest truths, and they can be kind of painful, right? But you have to hear them to grow. If you don't know them, you can't continue to hide from them and then expect different results. So with that being said, emotions are overrated, huh?
Emotions are overrated. Now, I struggle with this one, so I'll admit, because I've, really enjoy that concept of fear and celebration when you do put in the effort, and like kind of the dude perfect thing. I still think there's a place for that. I would love to sit down with Wooden at some point, maybe sometime unofficially. I don't know. I'll give him a call and ask him about that. Like, how do you, maybe it's just how you do it as a team, but I digress. So emotions are simple biological signals designed to nudge you in the direction of beneficial change. Negative emotions are a call to action. Oh, I'm going to die. Ooh, I need a drink of coffee. 1 second, everybody.
Yeah, no, you take a drink of coffee, reset yourself, take a moment. Well, I don't know what that half cough was, but let's get it out.
Negative emotions are a call to action. When you feel them, it's because you're supposed to do something. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. Do something. Positive emotions, on the other hand, are rewards for taking positive or proper action. Mm-hmm. So here's some funny notes. It's not a very long section in the book. He said emotions are a part of the equation of our lives, but not the entire equation. Just because something feels good doesn't mean it is good. Just because something feels bad doesn't mean it is bad. Emotions are merely signposts, suggestions that our neurobiology gives us, not commandments. Therefore, we shouldn't always trust our emotions, and we should make a habit of questioning them. Pain serves a purpose. Now, this is the one I thought, and he goes into the hedonic treadmill too, but the one I underlined that made me laugh was this. Athletes, coaches, whatever. And I see this like programmatically. You know who bases their entire lives on their emotions? 3-year-old kids and dogs. You know what else 3-year-old kids and dogs do? Crap on the carpet. And so there's an obsession, overinvestment in emotion. And later in the book it talks about anger, pain, and sadness, and all those other things. So the idea being is they're just information. Like, you don't have to go any further than that. Like, you only have to give it the whole equation. So I think it's a depth issue is what he's getting at for self-control. You're angry. Well, you don't have to live in that anger for the next 72 hours because the Lions got ripped off by the refs. Like, no, you don't have to do that, or something similar. So I think it is a depth issue, but he makes the strong case that it's just information. It tells you where to go.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, how did he distinguish that? He said positive emotions cause proper action and negative emotions create, what was the word that he used?
Negative emotions are a call to action to do something. And positive emotion were rewards, meaning you took proper action. And then he makes sure he distinguishes is that, okay, yeah, it feels good to eat a donut. It doesn't mean it always is good, kind of thing. So he has the qualifier after that.
Sure. There is an instant gratification then that comes into these emotions. And are you reacting as a means for instant gratification? That is to quickly reverse that negative feeling to a positive feeling? Or are you taking action long term? You're going the long game to turn that from negative to positive.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between the two? And are we deciding correctly between the two? That's very interesting. I've never heard that. I've never heard emotions put that way. Not just as a signpost, but also as a negative action is just your body telling you that you need to do something. Could we even say different?
It could be. I mean, I'm thinking of two things on a like moment to moment basis. When you're in the flow channel, if you're looking for more flow, the first thing you have is struggle. So struggle is discomfort because you're stretching yourself a little bit beyond what you can do. But stretching yourself, whether it's through this trigger, flow trigger, or that trigger, forces you to pay attention. So what your emotional feedback is, it doesn't feel good. Instead of going away from that, you need to lean into it. And then you can overcome it. And then I go have some positive emotion. That was one of my really interesting findings in video game play, is this oscillation of emotion. Like you experience a negative emotion. Okay, you don't get it. You come back against it. You come back against it. Oh, and then you defeat it. And then you have this release of like, yes, I got it. And then you move to another one. And it's this ability to go throughout. I think Woody even said it, as players at the beginning of the year. He's like, hey guys, like you're going to get credit for stuff that you don't deserve credit for. You're also going to get blamed for things that you don't deserve the blame for. And so through the course of a season, I don't know why people are so surprised that there's ups and downs. It would be boring if you just won every game. People love sports, or at least we're in the NFL wildcard weekend as we record this of 23-24. People love that arc, right? I mean, it gives us, it keeps our attention and gives us the investment. So both at a narrow zoom and a wide zoom, the emotions, we give them too much, and we go too far with them when they really are just giving us feedback on what's going on.
Yeah. So to that point, I think from a coach's perspective, understanding that your players' emotions are giving you feedback to what's going on, right? That they're wanting some sort of action, something to change, and being okay with that, right? Lean into your players' emotions in a healthy way, right? That doesn't mean, yeah, you should be pissed. Now go out there and take some heads off. Like, no, that's what I'm saying. But allowing your players to feel those things and then asking questions to get them through that process. So, for example, I think a really good one would be, you notice a player's getting frustrated within a game. Let's say, the refs have had a bad call. There's one specific defender that just keeps kicking them or pushing them, whatever. And there's a negative emotion there for the player. All right, here's the instant gratification piece. That player turns around and punches whoever's bothering him square in the jaw. Right? That would be the instant gratification. That would be like that instant release. Like, yeah, okay, I feel a little bit better here for a moment, right? Now we know long term that's going to lead to more negative feelings because of the ramifications and consequences of that action. But now, can you catch that? Lean into it. Like, hey, what are you feeling? I'm frustrated. This is happening. Okay. Why do you think this is happening? Well, because the ref is terrible, and because he keeps following me. And it's like, okay, I hear you. Here, how about this action? How about we get a little bit better about dribbling with our left hand, because you're so going to your right hand. He knows it every time. He's going to follow you every time you go to your right. We'll just leave him behind by a little hesitation to the right, cross over to the left. We could develop a step, right? So now you're starting to go through actual things like make them a better player, that you're using that emotion to drive, right? Now you're taking that emotion and you're pushing it towards development in a healthy way to overcome this. That will eventually lead to positive feelings, but it's more the long game.
I think,
and away from that instant gratification piece.
The two things that we don't utilize enough, I'll go to the easy one first, is substitutions. So kids at that, I'll just say 5th through 12th grade level, even probably through college at times, taking a kid out for a second is great. Hey, I took you out. You're a little too emotionally engaged, and you're hurting the team, right? Because it's almost impossible for your prefrontal cortex or your executive functioning to function when you are emotionally charged. So I think it'd be okay. I think we need to utilize the bench more. Like, hey, let's pull the play out for a second, call timeout. And then second thing is under is what you were saying is just the labeling. What are you feeling right now? I'm teed up. I'm angry, whatever it is. Label it and then walk through that process. I think that a lot of the vogue sports psychology, especially in the early 2000s, I know Cal State Fullerton had the little toilet that they flushed away, like when they struck out things. I think that's a oversimplification of the process.
Yep.
But I think what we're both getting at, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is to help develop self-control as a coach, you need to have some sort of emotional intelligence and literacy, not like a social worker where you're into whatever the wheel of emotions, but at a base level, like when an individual or player in the sports context experiences anger, just like fight, flight, and freeze, when you experience anger, what might a player do under that situation? Because that's familial then, right? I mean, you're seeing how is this emotion handled habitually in their context, whether it's with a family or, however they're raised. And that also can be over time. My dad's Irish and German. He's very hot-headed. So how emotion was handled for him might look different than Mark's family in the book, who suppressed emotion, like at all costs. So, I mean, you have families that's like where they yell at each other all the time, or you have a family that never yells at each other. Like Mark says, his parents didn't swear, didn't curse, didn't even raise their voices when he said they're getting divorced. And they're just getting divorced. Nothing happened. They're just getting divorced. And so he struggled with that. So like there is both the acting out and the acting in, and you're responsible as a coach. Like, hey, each player is going to react to a set emotion differently. And the one in particular is failure. What are they going to do when they fail? So,
I think to that point, and I'll end on this before we move on, is don't turn it off.
No,
that would be my biggest fear, and why I would say emotional intelligence, even on some level, is so important for coaches. And I think right now, the old school way, I would say, and I would say it's wrong. I'm all for tradition and love old things. I think that they work. I think in that way, though, and look, near and dear to my heart is young men, right? And trying to process emotion, go through emotions, and knowing that too often coaches, I'd even say father figures, teach young men to turn off their emotion, right? And look, I love Brad Stevens. I know you love Brad Stevens. One of the things that drew me to Brad Stevens was like, it didn't matter if they're up 50. It didn't matter if they were down by 50. It didn't matter if there was 30 seconds left in the national championship. Brad Stevens had the same expression on his face, all the time. And it wasn't Nick Saban, I think, is the same way since he just retired, but, be emotionally intelligent enough not to just sit someone on the bench until their emotion completely dissipates or goes away, and then basically you've just taught them, well, I can't have emotion or I go on the bench. No, I'm putting you on the bench to understand how to control what you're feeling right now and walk through it. There's a difference, right? I'm not telling you to turn it off. How can we use it to motivate you? How can we use that pain that you're feeling, that suffering you're going through, to take you to the next level in a constructive way, not punch someone in the face? Right.
Yeah. Or you even have a kid. One of the classic scenarios, I know we'll move on, you pick, but is like you're the last out of the game, or you let in the last goal. It's like, I saw a poor little guy, we're at a wrestling tournament yesterday. And it's in the second period and he's just waterworks. Like he's crying, and like the parents aren't doing this or anything wrong. But you mean that, the kid had finished wrestling and, he's making a spectacle. And just to slow down, like he didn't want to wrestle anymore. I mean, he's done. I mean, he's like 6, 7 years old. And you look at him and you say, oh, what's really bugging you? I mean, almost like get it in processing that, because I see that we move so quick. I don't know, just to throw them out there again when they're, even though they're not ready. And I don't know the right thing to do in that situation. I guess I would love just to have the kid talk to me and tell me, what are you feeling right now? And that's where that literacy is very, very valuable, because it's really hard to feel like from a tribal aspect, primal, it feels like you're letting your team down. And if it's a big thing, it feels like you're letting your town down and your community down. And then you have to, well, and I know this is in small towns everywhere. Well, you're a votal, like like you can't, mess up, like, because there's these, you have either family members or siblings who are, the next great thing, or maybe they even were the next great thing. So there's all this added pressure that's hard to sift through as a young kid. It's not easy to do that.
Yep, that's a big topic. I'm glad we touched on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last one here on the front half of the book. Good old Bill Raftery. Onions, the breakfast of self-control.
Oh my goodness! Yeah,
we're slowly progressing to March Madness, and me hearing onions a bunch of times over and over again from Bill Raftery. So, what you got on onions for us?
Vidalia is the fancy onions that was in a book. That was really cool. Somebody made a side hustle out of Vidalia onions. We need them as a sponsor. We need like our own like line. I'm just realizing as we go through books, we can like have our own product. Like we could be making our own pandas, Jake. We could be, selling onions. Like, okay. So onions. So this comes in the chapter about the value of suffering. And what I like to imagine this as is it's called the self-awareness onion. And so I remember we talked about the dessert of champions in a previous episode, but
ogres are like onions.
Yeah, I kids haven't seen that yet.
What onions? What about parfaits? Everyone loves parfaits. You'd be like a parfait. Sorry, I'm distracted.
Yeah, you're good. So with an onion, if you open up a really good onion, and onions have all sorts of health benefits, for the record. They don't exactly agree with me, but I think they'd make everything taste great. So self-awareness is like an onion, and it has layers just like an ogre. The first layer is just a simple understanding of one's emotions. I am happy. I am sad. This gives me hope. That said, we all have emotional blind spots. So the second layer is an ability to ask why we feel certain emotions. And they are often these why questions that take sometimes months and years. So like the initial emotion is just like moment to moment, day to day, right? The second layer is a little bit bigger. Why do you feel angry? Is it because you failed to achieve some goal? Why do you feel lethargic and uninterested? Is it because you don't think you're good enough? So you kind of dig under that. I know you're familiar with like the Toyota, the 5 whys. So it's basically that for emotions. So let's go. And we're not going to play therapist. That's not our job. But it's really interesting as a protocol to dig into the onion. And the deeper you go, the more likely you are to get some tears. So because you're getting to the heart of things. The third level, he even says it's the one that's full of effing tears. The third level is one of our personal values. Why do I consider this to be a success and failure? How am I choosing to measure myself? By what standard am I judging myself and everyone around me? But it's the most important because our values determine the nature of our problems, and the nature of our problems determines the quality of our lives. I gotta re-say that. The nature of our values determine the nature of our problems, and the nature of our problems determines the quality of our lives. Much of the advice out there operates at a shallow level of simply trying to make people feel good in the short term, while the real long-term problems never get solved. The more uncomfortable the answer, the more likely it is to be true. So he gives a couple examples. I'll just read it really quick because it'll make it more concrete, but they're not athletic, for the record. But it's fun to see the paradigm and be able to like copy paste it over to our context. So uses as a proxy. So a recent example from Mark's life. It bugs me that my brother doesn't return my texts or emails. Why? Well, because it feels like he doesn't give a crap about me. Why does this seem true? Because if he wanted to have a relationship with me, he would take 10 seconds out of his day to interact with me. Why does his lack of relationship with you feel like a failure? Well, because we're brothers. We're supposed to have a good relationship. Why are brothers supposed to have a good relationship? Well, because they're family, and family are supposed to be close. Why does that seem true? Well, because your family is supposed to matter you more than anyone else. Why does that seem true? Well, because being close with your family is normal and healthy, and I don't have that. And so he rechanged that value to say, the metric is like, he's using a metric of frequency of contact and comparing himself using that metric against everyone else he knows. And if he doesn't have that, he feels like there's something wrong with him. So I think the self-awareness onion is like, really prod at it, dig into that. And I think the questions give you the leverage to do that. And there is a time and space for that. I don't think you can do this, player walks up to you and you're like, let's get to that fourth layer of the onion, boy. I want tears. But just the idea of digging in and that not staying at that surface level. And be able, especially on the things you do value. I'm not saying do this for everything, because Mark, very clear, don't do this for everything. But the things you do care about, and there is something there. The one that hit me very hard was like, the more uncomfortable the answer, the more true it is. I'm like, I don't want to unpack that one right now, Mark. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about emotion, and it's obviously we're big time. The overarching thing is self-control, and how important it is to understand your emotion in that. And I think is if you're a coach here, we've kind of gotten to the weeds a little bit. I just want to encourage everyone. It's like, you don't need to be a psychiatrist to be a coach, but what you should be striving to do is give avenues for your players to develop better self-awareness and know themselves better, because it's a big part of development, right? So you don't need to have all of the answers, but just one moment where you stop and be like, yeah, what are you feeling right now? And then simply ask, why are you feeling that way? And you don't need to have a psychiatrist answer of, well, that emotion means that da 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 da, and this is a repressed memory from 14 years. No, that's not what we're going into here. We're just simply asking the question that will cause the player to think and process what they're feeling, right? They're doing all the work. You're just asking the question. So that's the one side of that. And understanding that the person in front of you is an onion. There's a lot of layers. They're probably at the most shallow layer. Okay. And you are asking them to take the knife and cut deeper. Okay. You are not taking the knife and cutting deeper. Let's be very clear here. Yeah. And then the other side of that, as players, understanding that we are complex human creatures. There is a lot going on. And if you want to be the best you have to know you. You have to be aware of you, and be comfortable going beyond just the surface level you, and being okay with that, processing all the information that's dug out of that, because you'll start to find better whys. You'll start to find values that ring more true to you, and that will help you develop, not just as a person, but also as a player, right? So that's what I get at the end. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, can I add two things? So remember our series on friendship? Go check that out. It's a good series. One of the big things from The Good Life, that longitudinal study, really looked at secret sharing as a key to friendship and digging in. So when we think of the self-awareness onion, obviously we're in kind of dealing with negative emotions, but what about positive ones? Where it's like, hey, why do you value that? Like, what, you have this goal. Like, let's just say we were talking about loyalty and strengths, and like, okay, you value this. Okay, well, let's dig into that. So using it as a both in the positive and the negative, harkening back to emotions are overrated, but getting deep into that value of even looking at that, and that's a way to develop loyalty in friendship and cooperation. Is like when somebody's fifth layer of their onion. It's not the same as somebody who just looks at you and says, "Oh, dude, you're an onion." And then the one that I was thinking of is modeling this. I will admit, I don't know if I've ever done this, so I'm just throwing it out there. We said we would ask an athlete to process. What if a coach processed? So you like, let me be serious. Like, so if let's just use basketball because it's winter as we record this. Imagine calling a timeout like 3 minutes into a game because your players left their effort on the bus. Guys, I am so angry right now, not with you, with your effort. Your effort is out there and it's as ice cold as an Arctic air. And the reason why I'm angry is because you guys are beating yourselves right now. And the reason you're beating, like you dig into your own onion as a way to because kids are, they'll go after your modeling. I don't think as a whole in the coaching, maybe not, I would love to be proven wrong. as an industry has developed that myelin around emotional intelligence to be able to communicate those layers deep so that people know you care. Because what we get is like, I'm angry, I call timeout, throw a clipboard, guys, I'm angry. That's okay. The emotion's fine. And Mark says that the emotion's fine. Don't change that. You don't have to be Brad Stevens. I'm not Brad Stevens. But dig into that and go deeper. I expect you to be this because we value this, and I need you to change it now, or we need to make some changes because we are not going to walk into a school and get beat by a team that, frankly, is not better than us. Because our value here is we put in our best effort regardless of our opponent. So be able to walk down that onion. I would love to make that exercise and just be able to run it myself under different game situations. So when something goes wrong or when something goes right, to be able to process with somebody like to model. You don't have to go 10 layers deep, don't get me wrong, but even 2 or 3 down, so kids can hear you say that, label it, give a reason, go a value deeper, encourage more of something, or use that emotion to change something. So yeah,
I love that. I think that was probably the best bit of this whole entire episode that you just went on. I think that's absolute genius to tie your emotion to a value that you have. Essentially, is what you're doing there in the moment to create a why behind your emotion will connect with. I can't imagine it's going to connect with players. I mean, I'm just thinking of all the times that people were emotional. I'm like, why are you kicking a cooler over there? What is going on? We're losing our way here. What's going on? But to be able to, like, even that in that emotion, have enough self-control to just go boom, 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 boom. This is why I feel that way. This isn't who we are. And to give that emotion something tangible for your players, I think is great for you. That was genius.
Who is the? I'm sorry, all the fans. Okay, Jonathan James McCarthy. He's getting a lot of attention right now. The Michigan quarterback.
Sure.
Right. He does the whole meditation grounding exercise before. But did you see the scene? Just double check. And no critique either way. Did you see the scene right before the national championship where he met one-on-one with the team's like mental performance guy? They kind of did this, and I would have to go back and find it. So somebody verify if need be. Even whenever you watch this, but there was a scene right before the game, and I think they've done this on a regular basis before each game. He just checked in with him. He said, "How you feeling? What are we envisioning?" So they did this check-in, like where they sat with whatever he's feeling. And you know what? If it's before a national championship game, you might be just buzzing, like, yeah, baby. Like, I mean, I'd be excited. But then they visualized that moment. They looked at what success would be. And I would have to look at the scaffolding of that particular interaction. But that would be kind of a model, albeit it's not in a game. But I mean, even beforehand, like he had developed that muscle, that habit of going through that. And you can kind of see, and I don't know this kid very well. I don't follow college football that closely, but JJ McCarthy, you can see that he is a composed young man. And I don't know how he's going to be. I don't know if he's declaring for the draft or if he's going to stay or what have you, but it's interesting to see that regardless of his performance, he is almost the epitome of self-control in terms of he's not rattled, but that is not an accident. You could see all the things he does in order to maintain or even execute that kind of state. And as a quarterback, if that guy is under control, you think he's going to be able to read what he's supposed to do with the ball. I mean, the physical components notwithstanding, but they won a national championship. So
yeah. I love it. That's a good example. No, I didn't see that. So that's
I'll see if I can find it.
So that's the first half of the book. We touched on 4 things. We got 10 things that we could have gone over. So there's a lot more. So plug to go get the book from bookshop.org. There's a lot more there. There's a lot more there that we could unpack for time reasons. Obviously, we're not going to do it because we're here to introduce you to kind of the basic concepts of the book and then let you go and dig further on your own journey. So moving now to the back half and the 5 backwards values. We got 5 of them there. I'm thinking we might only have time to get through 2 of them, and I definitely want to get through the last one, especially since we've been so hot on emotions here over the last segment. And It's regarding death and immortality. So I definitely want to touch on that one. But before we do that, why don't we jump to you're wrong about everything, but so am I.
Okay. Okay.
Can you unpack that one for us a little bit?
Yeah. Do you want to go more towards avoidance and vanilla, uncertainty, or the most important definition?
Let's go most important definition.
All right. This and those other things are good. So, uncertainty being you got to lean into that, and then some questions asked. And usually, most of the time, self control is really vanilla.
Mhm.
But in terms of the most important definition, sometimes in a book, things are very well laid out where there's a lot to unpack. And sometimes it's just a single sentence. And in this case, it is a longer section. But this one was just a single line with a little bit around it. So you're wrong about everything, but so am I. Here's the line. Each individual gets to decide what is enough. Happiness is not a destiny. Happiness was a destiny and not a choice. In fact, happiness is a choice and not a destiny. Our values are hypothesis. This behavior is good and important. The other behavior is not. Our actions are the experiments, the resulting emotions and thought patterns of our data. So we have a value, we take action, we get a score, like feedback. And, we're not going to cover it, but William James did this. He was kind of more or less a spoiled, what is a cake eater up into his 30s. And he was a wreck, physically failed everything, a failure to his father, a failure to this. And he undergoes this experiment under the You Are Always Choosing, where he decides to take responsibility for himself and believe he has control. But to get back to your point about enough, the most important definition and the idea of self-control and values is we live in a world where nothing is ever enough. I called it the cult of in the beginning, where we have to be bigger, better, faster, sexier, smarter, happier, this, or, we have this mass delusion that, if you aren't, then there's something wrong with me. And that gets into the tyranny of exceptionalism and other things. But talk to me about enough and the idea of self-control I would almost say in the nutrition sense, where it's like, yeah, one ice cream cone is good, 10 is not so great.
Yeah, I think it's maybe the ultimate dichotomy for professional athletes. I mean, obviously, I'm sure this happens in other sectors of professional life, but being that we're into sports, the professional athlete in this media call, this fan call, for them to be. I mean, look, every time you draft a player, any sport, what is your desire? Your desire is that they become the best player at that sport that has ever existed. Even if you don't admit it, you may be like, oh, okay, no, mid-second round pick, I would be happy if he's a role player with us for the next 8 years. But deep down, you're like, well, yeah, but I don't know, if he ends up being the next Michael Jordan, like, that I wouldn't complain about that either. And my point to that is that's what the fans expect, right? So the GM could be drafting under realistic expectations. I'll be happy if this player makes the roster year one. I may be happy if this player, is playing 15 minutes a game by year 2. I'll be really happy by year 4 he's starting. But you know what? I'll be happy if this is a role player for the next 5 to 6 years in my franchise. That's GM expectation. What's fan expectation? Dude, you just got drafted into professional sports. You're telling me you're shooting 25% from the 3-point line. What the heck is wrong with you?
Yep.
Right? Or whatever it may be. Or, hey, you've been in the league 4 years. Why aren't you the best big man in the league right now? What's going on? This pick was a failure, kind of a deal. And so I think, but that's a very specific, but just this general idea of, fans wanting them to be the best player that exists. They cannot have any failures, right? And what it would take for the athlete to actually become that. So let's look at those who have become it. Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, the ones Wayne Gretzky. Well, I don't know as much about Wayne.
I don't
in
either.
fairness, in terms of his personal life and things of that nature, you know. But Tom Brady's the most recent one. Tom sacrificed a lot to become that, right? Drew Brees sacrificed a lot to become the best quarterback that he could be. And we don't often understand what we're asking them to do. And it's very often, or it's very easy, I would imagine, for a professional athlete to get lost in that and sacrifice so much. And so it just creates a weird dichotomy for me of, yeah, what is enough? What truly is enough in the professional world?
And Mark makes a case. I'm gonna kind of weave around. So yes, to what you're adding. Because I have one thing I saw yesterday as well from that wrestling tournament that blew my mind. Values are process oriented, right? Brady in a video recently said, "Hey, I never said I was trying to be the best. I just was trying to get as good as I possibly could." And so he was obsessed with process. And I love hearing Gronk because he's such an antithesis to Brady, right? In a lot of ways. And I remember his description of what it was like to be a rookie with Brady. And like he held such a high standard of process. And I think we get so wrapped up, as you were describing with round picks, like there's an expectation of an outcome. And it's so detached from the process that we sometimes don't trust that the process is going to get here, because really we don't know, right? I mean, you are not entitled to the fruits of your labor, right? I mean, you can put in the labor, but you can't always know what that's going to produce, right? Because there's all sorts of variables that go with that. You have to be comfortable enough. And I think if we're being honest, that's not good enough for us. We feel entitled. And this was me, I felt entitled to get 4 hits because I hit 250 balls, right? And so to me, if I got anything less than that, because I had a crappy metric and a crappy value system, if I got any less than that, then I wasn't good enough or whatever. So we need to detach that. And what I was going to come around back to your point of what is enough, it's actually and he talks about this later on, it's very vanilla. And Ryan said that in Discipline is Destiny. It's like, you really don't have much. You can show up, you can do your things, and you leave it for the day, and then you come back again. And you do that as long as you can. What I heard that broke me, or I'm just thinking about a lot lately, is the devaluation of just do your best. Do we understand what that means? Just do your best. Do you know what your best requires? How hard of a bar that is? That is not oh yeah, just do your best. That's raising the bar. And so I'm staring at Wooden's pyramid. It's like, if we're being honest, like just knowing you did the best you could to become the best you're coming isn't enough for most of us. It's not good enough. Because we want all the stuff that comes with that, right? Because of that tyranny of exceptionalism. We all can't be Michael Jordan, and we're not okay with that. So he mentions like you're not special and that being a good thing. And it's like most people are bad at most things. Everybody wants to be MJ, nobody wants to be Rodman. Everybody wants to be this, they don't want to be that. And you know what? Your process might produce this role player on this really great team. And those are famous questions, right? Would you rather be the star player on a losing team or a role player on a championship team? And people struggle with that. Like, well, of course, the answer is, oh, I would want to be the role player on a championship team, but nobody actually believes that. And so this cheapening of best or lowering that bar, and I think that's one we really need to process, because the ability to define that ripples to the rest of our self-control.
Yep. I think you nailed it. Process versus outcome and what you focus on. It is very hard to have self-control when your emotions are dependent upon an outcome that you don't control.
Yes.
How can you have self-control in that avenue?
Yes.
Right. What can you have self-control in? Well, the process, the things that I do every day, I have control in. Okay. Now, that doesn't
Mhm.
shield you from the disappointment when the outcome may not happen the way you want it to, but you can regulate those emotions by going back to the same process. Or you can listen to those emotions and maybe it tells you, maybe my process isn't good enough. But you have a baseline for those emotions to come back to. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm very frustrated. I'm going back to my process. And I think it's interesting. Like, what if us as fans got to see the everyday athlete wake up at 6 o'clock to work out, get to, then get to the gym, get up some shots, then do another workout, then doing some cardio. Oh, yeah, practice is in 2 hours. Right. Haven't even started practice yet. Like, what if we viewed athletes that we care about based on the process that they give and not based on the outcome that we see?
Mhm.
It would be an interesting thing about how we would view, I think, just professional sports in general,
Mhm.
but also specific athletes and what we truly desired from them. But I think the distinction that you made between focusing on outcome versus focusing on process is absolutely key here. Where the thing that we didn't talk about that we bypassed was the first kind of backwards value was you are always choosing.
Yeah.
Be careful to choose things based on the outcome that you want and not on the process that you think is best, because you will be disappointed, right? Because look, the adage of there's so many things that are out of our control. It's true, but it's also true that you're choosing all the time.
Yep.
You're going to go into a downward spiral if you're constantly choosing things that are out of your control. It's just going to make you miserable and incredibly frustrated. So,
Well, and so to get really granular on that, so the example, and I've heard this one before, and I'm not going to go find it, but a novelist had written 70 novels, and they asked him his secret to how he did that, and he said like 200 crappy words per day. But he had done 200 crappy words per day, and so is it enough for you that I'm going to go hit 200 balls? I'm going to shoot 100 3-pointers or make 100 3-pointers, let's say, and let the chips fall where they may over time, right? Because if you did that every day, and you hear a lot of basketball shooters, like their routines. I'm a routine junkie. I love people's routines. I think people are quirky. I like to see, oh, if you do A, it sometimes gets you B, right? Kind of mimicking success. But choosing that the input is enough, not the output. Okay? And it's not always a more is better thing. We learned that from industriousness. You got to work hard and work smart. But really leaning into that is cool. I agree.
Okay. Love it. All right, let's jump to the last thing here before we wrap her up. And then you die. Immortality. What it all comes down to in the end for each and every one of us. What does Manson have to say about this?
So I don't know if we'll fully do the book justice, but let's give it a try, okay? So Mark
Give our
had
best effort. That's what we can do.
yeah, we'll go with it. This is very similar to Memento Mori and Ryan Holiday's Stoic sense, like honoring and keeping death at the forefront, because death, as Mark says here, is the light by which the shadow of all of life's meaning is measured. And he had a very tragic event where a friend close to him, died, and he had before that happened, and then after that happened. And so some of the things that are the worst moments of our lives can be also the most transformational. So why we don't avoid negative emotions at all costs, because they can be a catalyst upon which you build and grow if you choose to do so. So there was the pre and post. Before I wrap this argument, the one thing that I wrote down was RIP Rip Career. So we're talking about death like as in physical, like life death, right? One thing I'm trying to process is I think of professional athletes, college athletes, even high school athletes, as the Browns were eliminated as of yesterday and the Dolphins were eliminated, like the death of a career or the death of a season and the death of that group together. I mean, we already talked about how there's not enough of processing of emotion in general. We don't process grief enough either, right? I mean, you think every cycle you go through here, you're going to go through these stages of grief. So as much as emotional intelligence is a thing, the idea of processing loss and the regret and the anger, and you even hear it even when people win, and be able to process that. So I want to ask you about that first before I kind of grab this. Is talk to me about the death of soccer, like as a player. And I'll tell you about it just in my couple sports. But if you're able, I don't really have a good guiding question to that, but just the end, right? Because Manson mentions that there's like this death terror, like we're afraid of this, and a lot of our actions try to help us avoid thinking about that. Similar to he calls it also the root terror. So becoming uncomfortable with this realization that it's going to be over one day. Now in our cases as players, it is over. So what do you think about death as in terms of just a season or a career start?
Yeah, I mean it it broke me emotionally. And it was for me kind of something that I knew was coming. It was a weird thing. I fractured my back in high school. Gave me all sorts of fits and problems. I kind of got to my freshman year of college. Fall was miserable. The spring was amazing. Like it was equally amazing as the fall was miserable. And at that point, I felt like I was playing the best soccer I've ever played in my life. Everything was going well. It was great. Things happened. I had to transfer. Came back to Minnesota. And went into a tackle, flipped over, landed on my back, and like basically as soon as I hit the ground, it hit me. Like the whole thing snapped. It was just done. We're done. We can't do this anymore. And I spent days basically bawling my eyes out because I knew it just was never going to be the same. It couldn't be. And thankfully I still got to be around the game. I started getting into coaching to kind of get that, but it never replaces. You can be around the game, coaching, doing whatever on the game. It will never be the same as competing. Never be the same as the ups and downs that you feel as a player. And there was a massive mourning period for me. There's still times of what ifs. I would never call them regrets, but I would definitely call them what ifs. And wondering what could have happened had things played out differently. I'm also content, at the same time. It's a mix of emotions on both sides. But I think there still is a little part of grief in me, and how it happened, for sure.
So yours was injury based.
Yep.
And it's remember, and I know I referenced the movie too much, so you can slap me through the screen, or the audio. Mike is Moneyball. It's remember the scene where they're with Billy and they're recruiting him, or they're trying to get him to sign. He's like, how did they say it specifically? We all got to stop playing the game. We love Billy, and some of us sooner than others, kind of thing. Like, you remember the old guy?
Yep.
It comes, and we put it off. So in my case, I was never going to continue with basketball. Very much so. I was as average as come. I played a role. I was a Mr. Fundamental, do the basics. I was not going anywhere with that, but I knew there was an end. But that's a sport where you can theoretically just play pickup, and I was cool with that. Right? That was good enough for me. I had a definition of good enough, and that was good enough for me. The football is a lot harder, because not for me, but just in general, because like that does not have a longevity. You think of most people who even play in college. They're not even barely playing in college. So that one I kind of knew, and that was still sad, right? Because we're so into football in America, right? So football wasn't like, but baseball got me. So after going through a lot of physical change and be able to developing it better, I was never going to be the best, but I wanted to see how good I can get and how far I could go. And similar to you, mine wasn't just a tackle and a fall. Mine was a lot slower. And I in both in like actuality, like physically, but also emotionally. So I tore my labrum in my hip, and because my femurs were deformed, and we still have no idea how I got that and my twin didn't. And maybe he did, who knows? But I went from throwing very hard to throwing very slow. And when you're worse in college than you were in high school, you're like, this is stupid, especially when you don't know. I'll never forget that. And so as soon as I had labrum surgery at 19, 20 or whatever it was, I did the same. I started coaching, but I never got to see what it would have been like to focus on one sport to get as good as I possibly could. I will never know that. And that is probably one of the hardest things. And so I didn't end on my terms. And what Manson's getting at here, and I'll read some of the quotes, is that when you keep the end in mind, memento mori, it really takes off a lot of the F's that we really should not be caring about. So here's some concepts. The book that he mentions is The Denial of Death. I have not read that yet. It was written in 1974, Pulitzer Prize. Very interesting, Ernest Becker. But I'll just read some of the things that were mentioned, and we can talk about athletic immortality projects and what happiness is. So says, we are all aware on some level that our physical self or our careers will eventually die, that death is inevitable, and that its inevitability on some unconscious level scares the crap out of us. Like, we don't want to admit that, oh, by the way, I don't have, like, the closer you get to graduation for some sports, this is it. We try to construct a conceptual self or an athletic self that will live on forever. This is why people try so hard to put their names on buildings, earn statues, spines of books, earn an MVP award, a state championship, right? Becker calls these immortality projects that allow our conceptual self and our physical self to live on way past the point of our physical death, aka will be remembered for, right? Yep. All meaning in our life is shaped by this innate desire to never truly die. That's where I got immortality athletics. But if you haven't figured it out, he says, our immortality projects are our values. What Becker is saying in essence is that we're all driven by fear to give way too many F's about something, because giving an F about something is the only way to distract us from the reality and inevitability of our own death, athletic or otherwise. People's immortality projects, actually, he came to the realization that they were the problem, not the solution. Last point, people should question their conceptual self and be more comfortable with the reality of their own death. Becker called this the bitter antidote. And he struggled with this himself as he died of colon cancer. While death is bad, it is inevitable. Therefore, we should not avoid the realization that your career will end, but rather come to terms with it as best as we can. Because once we become comfortable with the fact of our own death, athletic or in life, the root terror, the underlying anxiety motivating all of our life's frivolous ambitions, we can then choose our values more freely, unrestrained by the illogical quest for immortality, and freed from dangerous dogmatic views. Very heavy to unpack. But Mark Twain, I'll put a bow on this portion, is he said that the fear of death follows from a fear of life. A man who lives fully, or an athlete or a coach who lives fully, is prepared to die at any time. Ultimate self. I wrote down the ultimate self-control.
I heard a pastor recently say, because I'm not afraid of not getting to heaven. I'm afraid of getting there and God introducing me to the guy I was supposed to be.
Oh, don't say that. Oh.
I think what I would take from kind of what you laid out there is that death sharpens our focus on what truly matters. There is no greater motivator than, well, essentially we're talking about time, right? Time is short. And so it quickly draws that part of our brain to attention and focuses on what truly matters, right? And it really causes us to dwell on, and I'm a father. What I think there are some people that want to leave a bigger legacy. They want to leave their name on the buildings and things and the stuff. For me, that question just brings about, what do I want my children to possess of mine as they take off into their own lives? That's my biggest and greatest question. And I don't mean which one gets the house and which one no, I mean, what have I learned over the years that I want them to understand on a deep, deep note, that I want to be part of their very being, that will carry them through life. And there's no greater motivation to ask that question and really get your brain to focus in on what those things are than death, you know? And I guess I never really operated while I was playing it, like, well, this is going to end someday. And it's an interesting thought exercise. Like, if that would have gone through my head, I wonder what I would have processed it as. I wonder where my head would have gone if someone really made me sit down and answer that question. I don't know. Even being in my 30s now, like, I don't know. I don't know how I would answer that. How that would cause me to focus as an athlete.
The disappointment panda, to harken back, handing out like these bitter antidote pills. I don't know, like there's this whole like wave of thing, like blue pill, red pill, black pill, white pill. I don't know, all the pills, whatever. I don't understand those. So if somebody knows better, whatever. But the idea of like taking the bitter antidote in this case, the onions concept is cool. Self-control being pretty vanilla, more or less. But taking this antidote on the front end, you know, and I've mentioned Tim Urban's The Tail End. I don't know how I process this either. And to be clear, I don't expect a coach or an athlete to have answers to all these. I don't. I mean, this is why I'm studying these things and trying to figure it out as well. But to be able to, if you like you said, kudos to you, you know, to sitting with you're having self-awareness to what do I want to choose to pass to my kids. Now, in a coach's case, it might be your athletes. I actually don't really mind what that answer is. Right? I really don't. If you're a coach and you're Fleck, or if you're somebody else that you're Saban, or all these guys that are retiring or changing jobs, it's just that you did take the time to say, I value this. This is the program, and I want to pass this down. Now, do you get a little bit of control in that aspect? Well, yeah, of course you do. And remember, not every athlete likes every coach the same, but you know, and some kids are going to resonate with that thing more. It's just that you took the time to care. You took the time to think about it. You took the time to try. And I appreciate that thoughtfulness versus the reactivity of, you know, we won this game, we lost this game. Oh, you know, we're great. We're terrible. You know, stop crying, you know?
Yep.
So,
yeah, no, kind of a heavy thing to end on, for sure. But I think it's a question that I don't think we ask enough, especially even in the sports world. You know, that probably doesn't mean that if you're coaching 8-year-olds, you should go to practice next time and be like, all right, guys, you're going to have to stop playing at some point.
well,
how do you want this to all end? Kind of
but that's really, I actually think it's great to end on this, because it speaks to really a big theme throughout Mark's book, is like, you have to lean into some of that in order to see clearly. Absolutely. And so I think of some of the other excerpts in books. So have you ever heard of people who've had near-death experiences?
Oh, yeah.
So it's like the Fight Club, and I don't mean to bring in a violent image, but if somebody was held up at gunpoint and they said the clarity and appreciation and savoring they had for life those next 2-3 days was something like they wish they could have every single day. And they wish they did, and they actually openly acknowledged, I don't remember who it was, said, but it went away. And so just continue to take that bitter antidote, because when you do throw up the end of your career up against everything, so you and I, let's just say, Heck, I'd even go back to a basketball practice at this point, which I'd loathe with every portion of my being. I hated basketball practice. Basketball season took forever. Even football in November, it's like, or late October, it's freezing and you're hurting. But, and in the context of the death of your career, playing career, now all that other stuff didn't matter. You're just happy to practice.
Yeah.
Just be able to play. Just be around your friends to take one more bus ride. You know, like I don't remember any of the records, maybe 2 or 3 across 20 years, but I do remember those little things. So yeah, I got you.
Yep. No, the biggest distresses in my life have produced the biggest miracles and the craziest moments. I think that goes for athletes too. Don't run away from the distress, the hard part.
No. Well, let's wrap. So the first book was Discipline is Destiny. Ryan Holiday. We really got a good example of the inner domain, the external, so the body, and then the magisterial. A lot of good practical tips. That was a good overview of self-control. This one, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, Counterintuitive Approach to Living the Good Life by Mark Manson. Get it wherever books are sold. A lot more deeper into that emotional realm, controlling that. I know we needed to touch on that because it was a big deal under Woodin's definition. And next episode, do check out. We're going to be getting into a complaint-free world, how to stop complaining and start enjoying the life you always wanted. I just cannot imagine a program or a person or whatever complaint-free. It's just in the sports world. I just cannot envision it. So the idea of getting really practical of self-control in just this one aspect of no complaining will be super fun in our third installment before we get to that fourth and fifth. Anything else to say on Manson or anything else on self-control that popped up? I had a lot of fun today. It was different format, but it was it flew. It
did fly, and it was good. I thought there was a lot of good discussion and good things that we brought up. I thought the emotional stuff was super good. They're ending it with immortality is always a good wrap on things. But I really enjoyed it. I think we nailed some good content, and I appreciate the audience. I appreciate you, brother man.
You too. Never stop learning, everybody. There's always something out there. Get a little better than you did yesterday, self-control or otherwise. We will see you on the next episode. Jake, well done as always.
See ya.
Yeah.